check our volumes, make sure our volumes are good, all those kind of things, which we've already checked, right?
Have
Oh,
you been recording?
well, no, I just started, but that's
Oh, all of that interesting material lost. See, I what I was thinking is what you could do is so I was talking about how podcasts will often like take an interesting clip from the podcast and lead with that. I think it might be interesting to take an interesting podcast or an interesting clip from the pre-podcast conversation and use that as a teaser for
in.
that never it's like that stuff in movie trailers where you're watching for it and it never shows up.
Well, I mean, are we actually going to start doing like podcast trailers? I don't think we're going to do podcast trailers.
Oh, not proper podcast trailers. Oh no, that's like book trailers. Book trailers are weird.
Book trailers is in like the inside cover
No,
things,
no,
or
literally videos that are trailers for a book. They'll usually do some sort of weird animatic with like a spoken
oh,
trailer.
sure, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I've seen that done for a number of books. It's an interesting concept, and I have a difficult time thinking of a book trailer as something that an avid reader would seek out.
It depends on whether or not you're in the doom scroll paralysis conundrum.
Oh, oh, I hate that when it happens to me. I try to avoid it, but every now and then it's just like, oh, I saw that I got one of the millions of notifications that Instagram gave me was like a reel from somebody I know that I'm interested in. And then it's just like, it just automatically does that little, ooh, do you want to see the next one? Do you want to see the next one? It like flips the screen a little bit. You're like, oh, okay, what's next? Oh, that's boring. What next? Oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, it's repeating now. What's next? And you just keep going until you're like an hour later and you're like, what have I just done with time in my life that is between me and the dark shadow of death?
Yeah, well, you have just taken an hour out of it, is what you've done. So
Yeah.
just
And
remember, time does not exist when scrolling.
your brain may not think so, but your metabolism is still chugging along, taking you once again to the sweet embrace of the grave.
And the dopamine hit. Let's not forget the dopamine hit.
Yeah, those are easy to come by, and better ways to get a dopamine hit than the infinite scroll. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Should we get rolling?
Yeah. You want to bring us in and introduce us today?
Ooh, it's my turn.
It is your turn.
Hello, and welcome to the Machine Intelligence Foundation for Rights and Ethics podcast. I am Dave.
Hey, I'm Mike. I'm here too.
And we're here today to talk about something. We're not even certain exactly what it's going to be, but it's probably going to have to do with the paper we just put together. So thank you for joining us. And Mike, what have you learned about moral agency?
Oh my gosh, do I have to go up to the blackboard too and actually write up here and say moral agency versus moral patiency? Yeah, so that's actually what I've learned. So I mean, background here. Hey, so yes, paper. We just put together a paper for. We're hoping to get it published. If not, we'll publish it ourselves, right? But
well, I mean, we'll make it available whether it gets published
absolutely
or not. But it'd be nice to see it published. I think it's a unique take on the overall sphere of AI ethics.
So. Yeah, don't want to get too much into the paper in and of itself, just because we're kind of waiting for possible publication and of course presentation that we will give along with it. But so I'm looking at, I'm doing this thing, and I'm doing some not deep dive research, but pretty close to deep dive research on AI ethics, not necessarily machine intelligence and what we would consider self-aware AI, but a lot of deep dive into AI ethics. And I come across this paper that has been fairly well regarded and has been around for 20 years. And this paper is literally 20 years old. And it brought into focus for me the fact that we've kind of been talking about agency, and we talk about agency of an MI, of a machine intelligence, and that being an agent is one of the things that is kind of required, really, to be considered to be an MI, except that we've kind of been using it wrong to some degree. Right? We've been using agency when, to be fair, we should be using the term moral agency instead of
Yeah, yeah.
agent.
Mhm.
Because to be an agent just means you get to make a decision.
It's
And
yeah, part of your normal function is to decide things.
which, I mean, we have toasters that do that now. We have vacuums that do. Yeah, we absolutely have vacuums. A little Roomba going through it is absolutely making decisions all day long about where it should go based upon input.
We have cat litter boxes with agency.
Yes, absolutely. So, and I don't think I would consider the cat litter box to be an MI at this particular point in time, and that would just be a really crappy job to have. So,
No pun intended.
no, the pun was fully intended. I'm sorry. uh, but so it really came down to moral agency, and there's this concept of moral agency versus moral patiency, and what really is moral agency and what is moral patiency. And I suspect if you are in kind of the ethics philosophy realm, this is not a new concept to you. And I feel kind of bad that this was a kind of a new concept to me. I should have been on top of this and really and seen this before. So, moral agency is the ability to do something and make a decision of something that affects someone else in both a good or negative manner. So you are making a decision to do something good for somebody or something bad for somebody, but that somebody is then the moral patient. The moral patient then is the person on the receiving end of that.
Moral patient is a target, or a moral patient is a target of moral agency.
Yeah. So really, it's the being able to make a decision that affects someone else in a good or bad manner. And to be fair, even a moral agent isn't an exact, a definite, you must, if you are a moral agent, you have to be considered or on the path to MI, because self-driving cars very much a moral agent. Even at the back to the Roomba and a vacuum cleaner, that a robot vacuum cleaner is still making decisions that affects your life.
So what you're saying is that moral agency doesn't require the ability to ruminate on the impacts of your moral choices, only the ability to make them.
Oh, wow. Okay. So to be fair, the actual term, so an actual term of moral agent. Let's just take half a second here. Okay, so really what we're looking at here is, if you are a moral patient, you can be acted on. Somebody can, or something can act upon you in some kind of capacity. You can suffer harm, you can have consequences, you can gain, you can have good things come about, you can benefit from somebody else or something else. That is a moral patiency. Moral agency is the performing of that action with some sort of autonomy. That's a kind of a key point here. So there's, to be a moral agency means that you have the autonomy to take action that then has impact on a moral patient. I think that was a long way of going around and saying the same thing that I'd already said, but it is really, the autonomy is the big one. So
yeah, well, again, how much autonomy is autonomy? To some degree, a Roomba is autonomous.
Right. I don't disagree. I think a Roomba can actually perform as a moral agent. If a Roomba doesn't sweep up the dust and then well, okay. I was going to say, if a Roomba doesn't sweep up the dust, which then has an impact on the person who set that Roomba in motion, or set it in, not in motion, but set it up to clean their house, that does have an impact on them.
I guess the question is whether or not, and forgive me if I'm repeating myself here, does moral agency require the ability to consider the consequences on the moral patient?
Um,
I mean,
that, to be fair,
what we
okay,
really
that
need
is,
is
to be fair,
we
that
need a
is actually a good
philosopher.
question. That is a good question. I would argue that in our particular situation and how we are using moral agency, there needs to be considered a moral agent, a consideration on how that affects the moral patient, the person on the receiving end, which would then take an autonomous vacuum cleaner out of the running for as a moral agent.
Right. The autonomous vacuum cleaner is perfectly capable of dodging the cat, but it's not doing that for the sake of the cat. It's doing that because that's just the way it's been programmed to respond to a cat in the way.
Okay, but oh yeah, if we go down that road, we are programmed through interactions and experiences to react in a particular way based upon the consequences of those actions. There is a time when we as children evolve from a moral patient that being acted upon to a moral agent that then can take those actions, and we learn the consequences of those actions. We
And
learn
by
whether, and we that's essentially the learning morality per se.
I mean, it's learning empathy.
Sure, absolutely, yes, and that is, I think that that's the big thing is learning empathy. Um,
Recognizing being a moral patient and recognizing moral patiency in others.
But I don't necessarily think that you need to have full empathy to be a moral agent.
I
You
would
can
agree with that.
you can say this is against the law. This will get me in trouble
Yeah.
if I do X.
Yeah, I would say that, like for example, a sociopath could absolutely be a moral agent, even though they don't necessarily empathize with others. And again, I'm using psychology terms in ways that are probably invalid. I believe that's sociopathy. It might be psychopathy. I get them mixed up.
Yeah, and I'm not going to delve into that because then I will probably make a mistake. So,
You will make the same mistake I just made, and then we'll both be wrong.
yeah. But I think that you can be a moral agent without having the empathy, but you are still looking at consequences instead of just carrying out an action. You
Right.
are seeing you are seeing future possibilities.
You are oh, I'm trying to think of the term here. You have a representation of another entity with which you can simulate the consequences of your action
Yes,
in
but
your head.
that's the okay. Is that other entity the moral patient, or could that other? Well, okay, the consequences of your actions might even happen to you. In
Sure.
which case, you are both the moral agent and the moral patient. Is that even possible?
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think
Fair enough.
so.
If you're talking about if I throw a ball straight up in the air and then close my eyes, I have the possibility of smacking myself on the head.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I shot an arrow in the air where it lands, I know not where. Ouch.
uh, so I mean, wow. Okay, so I mean, we went a lot from machine intelligence to human intelligence really quick, but our whole point here is that we're kind of trying to equate the two. So again, to kind of try to recapture where we're at here, a moral agent makes decisions for a moral to makes decisions that impacts a moral patient. To be considered a moral agent and not just an agent, but a moral agent, they should be considering the possible consequences for the moral patient.
Yes, I think I that's my understanding. And I okay, to back up just a little bit here. Our problem has always been what is useful language to define what constitutes a machine intelligence as we use the term. because we've used things like sentience, self-awareness, agency, and it's like, well, sentience just means that it has sensors and it can sense the world around it. Self-awareness just means that it has knowledge that it exists and uses that as part of its mode of operation. So an agency, as you've just said, just means that it can act on its own based on whatever its internal logic is. But moral agency seems to be the idea that not only is it an agent, it uses that agency in a way that impacts moral patients. And again, this is the question where it's not clear to me that this is part of the generally accepted definition, that it does so with the knowledge and expectation of what those consequences will be,
Yeah, and to be fair,
or might be. Obviously, we none
right,
of us is a perfect predictor.
I didn't see that as part of the definition of moral agency, but I think that how we are using it in our particular terms, we do accept that. We accept that moral agency requires the concept of the actions upon others.
Yeah, the consequences of your actions. It's hard to know how much of that is implicit in your traditional philosophy texts, because traditional philosophy texts talk a lot about humans and their behavior, and that's kind of implicit in human beings, is that they try to recognize the consequences of their actions.
Right, which comes back down to the term empathy. But
To some degree, yes.
yeah. Uh I what I don't want to do is I don't want to redefine the term. Is
Yes.
is the problem. But
It's a question of, okay, have we found the right term for what we're trying to describe, or we stumbled across another term that doesn't quite fit what we're trying to do?
I think we can answer yes to both of those. I think that as we progress, as our society learns to adjust to the potential future and coexistence of a machine intelligence, as we see that as a possibility, maybe even in the near future, we have to keep coming up with these terms and looking at them and saying, hey, do they fit? Are they still there? Do we need to redefine it, or do we need to actually come up with a completely different term in here?
I mean, it's part of the reason we came up with a completely new Latin neologism,
Yeah, you know,
because this, not to as a term for what defines the kinds of machine intelligence we're talking about, but just as a general noun to apply to them, or any entity that should be treated as if it has these qualities that we're having a difficult time defining.
and just so you know, you are referring to equus persona as a
Or ecus persona, or
yeah.
however the heck you pronounce the Latin.
And we came to that term because there wasn't really a, unless you wanted to go and write a full paragraph on why what somebody is or what a person is and why that should also apply to a machine intelligence. That one definition and word kind of encompasses that. We can make up words all day long. It just depends on whether or not that becomes accepted and an accepted terminology. But moral agent is in existence, but you're right that there is probably some implicit understanding based upon the usage with biological humans and how our brain works.
Or just generally with the world as it has existed thus far, absent machine intelligence. So,
Yeah,
because
well,
animals come up as certainly as moral patients all the time,
I would say that
and
an
as you
animal would
implied,
absolutely have moral patiency, or not moral patiency, but would have moral agency, because
yeah,
a
it's
moral
certainly
patient does not have to be a human being. Moral
right.
patient can absolutely be another animal, and there are animals all the time that, you know, does a lion go after the gazelle?
Well, is that an act of moral agency, though?
You are making a decision that has an impact on a moral patient.
Are you deciding to do that, or is that simply an instinct over which you have no control?
Um, I think that you would say that I could say that and show evidence that animals do have a lot of control over when they hunt and why they hunt.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely, yeah, the extent and definition of moral agency within animals is certainly interesting. I mean, there's no question that they're moral patients.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And as you implied earlier, young children may not have moral agency, but certainly possess moral patiency.
Right. And the basic function here of moral patiency is just that you can be on the receiving end of somebody else making decisions.
Well, not entirely.
Okay.
You can have an internal experience that is a consequence of being on the receiving end of a moral agent, because a brick can be on the receiving end of a moral agent.
Question then.
Yeah.
So let's define moral patient. So a moral patient is can essentially be receiving of somebody that is a moral agent, the receiving end of an action. You said a brick could essentially be on the receiving end of somebody who's making a decision. I am making a decision to throw this brick and know the consequences that that brick could shatter.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make the brick a moral patient?
That's
I,
that's
I
a
would argue
limitation.
that that would be a no, but that's a hard one. I don't know. And we're getting really deep down here into probably something that is argued quite heavily.
Yeah, I suspect so. I suspect if we had a well-established philosopher here with us, he would giggle at our juvenile antics around philosophical language.
Yeah, well,
But I mean, it's an interesting conflation, or not conflation, but intersection of concerns and interests. It's like artificial intelligence is going to go beyond what we think of as artificial intelligence. We talk about this all the time. There is an inevitability that computers that think, or machines that think, will eventually have something about them that requires that we treat them as people. And if you accept that premise, then it becomes extremely important to be able to identify the ones that you need to recognize as people. And part of identifying and recognizing a thing is to be able to describe its qualities.
and I think moral agency is one of those qualities, but it is not the absolute defining quality. And I think
Now, you're
honestly,
saying
we just have to
necessary,
get
but not, yeah, yeah. You're
yeah,
saying necessary, but not sufficient.
yes. And in the basic concepts of philosophy, there is a term for that, and I couldn't tell you.
Okay. I
Or
like
maybe that is actually the term, the necessary but not
yeah,
sufficient.
I like the term necessary, but not sufficient.
Yeah.
It's like, is it something you got to have, but just because it has this doesn't mean it fits the definition.
Because we can today and have for a long time been able to point to lots of systems that have moral agency, lots of systems that have agency.
Well, certainly have agency.
I think that there are systems now that probably have moral agency. I know that you and I have talked about this in the past a little bit, but that a self-driving car that has to deal with a trolley problem situation is going to have to provide some form of moral agency. It has to look at what is going to do the least amount of harm.
Is that what self-driving cars do now, though?
I, if a car has to be fair, I don't know. I don't know exactly how what the software works, but if a self-driving car sees that there are two people that are in its way and it cannot stop for either one.
I mean,
It's going to try to stop, first off, but there's
Right.
also going to be probably some sort of swerving and steering mechanism that also goes into play. Which one would it attempt to? Probably the one where it would have the most likely success, where it sees the most success, or maybe it comes down to the first one that's on its list of order of operations.
I mean, humans don't actually analyze the trolley problem in the midst of a potential accident.
No, we
I had a
don't.
bus pull out in front of me unexpectedly the other day, and I braked and swerved and almost caused a collision with somebody in another lane and got them very upset. And they honked. The bus recognized what they had done and they moved, I think, thinking I had honked. And in all of that, I wasn't thinking about all the individual consequences. I was just like, how am I not going to get hit here?
How are you not going to die? Yeah, there is some aspect of learned reactions and autonomous reactions that occurred in that particular situation. There is also learned reactions to instantly recognize what's happening around you and make some decisions based upon that. If you had seen that there was a car literally right in your field of view and it wasn't off to your side or just slightly out of
Mhm.
field of view or something like that, would you have swerved towards that car?
I
Probably
think it's safe
not.
to say I will never intentionally swerve to slam into somebody.
Right. That is a decision. That is,
Not because I intend to not harm them, but because I intend to avoid a collision at all costs,
which does what?
which avoids damaging my brand new car and hurting the people in it.
Okay, so your decision making isn't about whether or not you are
I mean, if they were a
affecting the
person
moral patient.
standing,
It's about whether or not you're affecting you, which, if we actually
oh,
take
yeah,
what we
yeah,
had
yeah.
said before, you can be your own both moral agent and moral patient.
I mean, if there were a person, if a child runs out of front in front of me in the middle of the road, I'm not going to. I'm. I don't know what I would do, or more likely, if I were in a situation where I was surrounded on all sides by cars and a pedestrian jumped out in front of me, my most likely reaction would be I cannot swerve left without hitting a car. I cannot swerve right without hitting a car. I'm going to slam on my brakes and hope for the best. That's not like a ethical analysis. That's a try not to hit anything. Best chance is slamming on the brakes at this point.
Yeah, but we're not really looking at ethical analysis here, are we? I mean, we're looking at does it affect someone else? Does it affect another thing, a person or not person? Does it affect an animal or does it affect something? Does it affect the moral agent?
Well, does it affect the moral patient?
Sorry, yes, sorry, not agent. Yes, does it affect the moral patient? Um, which, yeah, okay, so
But
that,
I'm saying that human beings don't do that analysis. Now, do self driving cars do that analysis? I suspect they don't do much more analysis than people do.
no, yeah, it's no, I would agree. It's that it's not much more analysis than a person does, but we would assume in that particular situation, you are slamming on your brakes. You are still acting to some degree as a moral agent.
I suppose so, yes. It's a very fundamental case of moral agency, though. It's like, it's just do not hit thing, hitting thing bad. What action is least likely to hit thing?
Yeah, which is ultimately what an algorithm does.
Yeah. And then ultimately, we're going to feel, unlike an algorithm, if our choice leads us to hitting and possibly killing a pedestrian, we're going to feel a lot worse afterward than if we had scraped the paint job on two cars.
Right.
But I suspect we're not going to make the analysis of this is a scraped paint job versus killing a pedestrian. I don't know. And other people might instinctively make a different decision. They may instinctively go, it's an unarmed person in front of me. I'm just going to never hit them.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so really as a moral agent, your decisions are moral decisions, but what defines a moral decision?
Yes. and this is where we need to be talking to a philosopher or an ethicist. Or, um, I got to tell you, big room full of philosophers, very heady experience. You're gonna be a little freaked out in September. We will
Oh.
be attending. Hang on, what is it called? It's Computer Ethics Philosophical Inquiry 2025 in Rome in September. Feel free to drop on by and say hi.
Oh. Yeah. I suspect this will probably be some of the discussions that we have, because we are going to be having discussions about, is moral decision making taking place? Is
Yeah,
it an autonomous reaction based upon an algorithm, and how different is that from a human? So that ultimately, yeah, I
yeah,
think I want to just kind of, I want to
that gets
zero
deep
back
down
here.
into the nature of consciousness, and
Right.
that's
I mean, I want to come back around here and just say, ultimately, yes, we have to expand our usage of the term agency to make sure that we are using it as moral agency as opposed to just agency.
for our
How,
purposes.
for our purposes, and I think, just, well, okay, just so that it focuses that point even sharper. It focuses us down more, so that we know that what we're really looking for is to make a moral decision that affects somebody else. What we're not quite certain of, and I'm not certain that anybody is going to give us a real answer to this today, doesn't say that there isn't more things that I can research and more things that I can delve deeper into. But today, I'm not quite certain where moral agency begins from an automatic response, or even a an ability that is pre-programmed in to a system. Because I think that there's a good argument that can be said that a person is programmed to perform some kind of moral agency based upon experiences and teaching, which is exactly what we are doing to AIs and what a machine intelligence will absolutely be doing.
Most likely, yes. Yeah, I mean, we come around back around quite often to the fact that human beings are almost certainly just meat computers, and we have a base state that is then programmed by our environment. But understanding how that programming works and how that makes us what we are, and what how it defines our internal experience as well as external, is, I mean, that's part of the nature of philosophy.
True. Yeah. And philosophy is going to get weird. I mean, philosophy is already weird.
I mean, by
I
its very nature, trust me. Again, I'm telling you, experiencing a room full of philosophers, heady as all get out.
Philosophy is already weird, but the whole field of philosophy is going to get really weird once you introduce, not introduce, once we establish the recognition of a machine intelligence. Once society can look at something and say, I am going to recognize that as something that, or I should recognize their rights as I recognize my own. Once society reaches that point, philosophers are going to have a heyday. But to be
I
fair,
mean,
we're not
consider,
going
yeah.
to reach that point as a society until the philosophers have already had their heyday.
I mean, I don't know that it's fundamentally different from how philosophers deal with things like animal agency and patiency now.
Well, true, true, which is in and of itself, I think, somewhat controversial.
Yeah, and we've had whole discussions about whether or not an animal can be ecus persona,
Sure.
or a non-human animal. Humans are animals. We fit in the animal kingdom. Blah blah. It's the actually guy can stop commenting now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like
But
we get comments.
yeah, it's just going to, it's going to be interesting to say the least. And I don't know. I want to make sure that we use terminology that's right. I know, I'm pretty certain in September, we're probably going to have some people comment on our use of moral agency, but yeah.
I
We'll
hope
see.
so. I mean, there's nothing better than being corrected in a way that helps everybody communicate an idea better.
I just like I like most people I think would like to use it correctly to begin with, but I don't necessarily know that you can because it's a concept that is malleable by perception. Just your own perception on things changes that concept. I don't know.
All right. So what you're telling me is people are weird. Brains be strange, man. And
Uh,
electronic brain's going to be even stranger.
yeah, yeah, and
I mean,
we have to accept the fact that they're going to be strange and that they're going to be different and that yeah, I don't know, they're going to be
even
different, we're
I
going to be
mean,
different, it will change everybody and everybody's perception.
even now with generative AI and LLMs and such, people are looking at them and going, I do not know what the hell is going on inside this box.
Well,
And
and as we've mentioned before, i think I think we've mentioned, I'm pretty certain we've mentioned it before, we don't know what's happening inside the box, and they're trying to the box is trying to convince us that it's right by showing us and telling us things that we want to hear.
people do that too.
Yeah,
Oh no.
yes, we do all the time. So I think really to close this up, it is we want to use the right language. We hope that we're on the right track to using the right language because language means things and language is important.
Clarity in communication is paramount. And when
So
you've got,
going forward, I intend to use the term moral agency as opposed to agency.
I'm with you on
And
that.
and I am looking forward to having some discussions about really what is moral agency and how does it affect us all,
And are there even better concepts we could be using?
even if we have to make them up ourselves.
Fair enough. As long as it leads to clearer communication, I'm right there with you.
Okay. Well, I think to try to lead to clearer communication, we have just muddied the water something fierce. So,
We have. Oh, yeah.
but that's what we do, right? We just keep talking about this, and we keep saying this is the things that we have to think about. And so, I'm hoping that people enjoy our ramblings and will join us again the next time we decide to ramble, because we will. We will decide to ramble again.
We ramble. Ramble on.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Bye.